Chess friends, today I want to explore the 7th dimensional chess by showing you an intriguing opening named Halas McDonnell Gambit, which is very rare by its playing style. This opening made me curious, so I decided to look into it more. Let's break it down step by step. So, in this opening that Halas liked, white has more pawns on the side where the king is located, which is called the king side. This means white can easily advance these pawns forward, especially when the knight moves out, creating exciting attacking chances for white. Now, let's talk about the main sequence of moves. Usually, when your opponent sees that one of your pawns is being attacked, they try to protect it by moving their knight to a safe spot. Then, you respond by adding more pressure with your own knight, and they counter that by defending with their bishop. After that sequence of moves, you can focus on developing your pieces in a relaxed manner. Now, even though black technically has an extra pawn, there's a drawback too. This extra pawn ends up blocking their own bishop, making it less effective, essentially. It's like having a tall pawn instead of a useful bishop. Furthermore, if both sides continue developing their pieces without any major disruptions, this is actually a bad move for black. Even though it might seem surprising at first, this move allows white to play e5, which is one of the key ideas in this opening. This move kicks black's knight away, and then comes the powerful sacrifice of the bishop on f7, known as the Great Gift Sacrifice. This move practically forces black's king to capture the bishop, and then white follows up with the knight to g5, which is a well-known tactical motif that leads to a winning advantage for white. And let me tell you a quote about life, because quotes give inspiration and inner motif to think differently. Look at yourself in a mirror and tell yourself how proud you are to have come this far. So we deliver a check to the king. Black's king is checked and must move. If it retreats, white can bring the queen out, threatening checkmate on h7, so, black's only option is to try and escape with their king. However, there's a key tactic to remember here. Instead of chasing the king directly, white can capture the pawn on f7, which is no longer protected by the rook, and this move works in various chess openings when you execute the Great Gift Sacrifice. After capturing the material with the queen, you continue delivering checks with your pieces until you achieve checkmate. I'll show you some alternative moves that your opponent might make from the main line, but first, I want to share another main line that's really impressive. I found a move that I would rate as god level with 4 exclamation marks. If you ever come across a player nicknamed Drunkenstein, who is a reference to Magnus Carlsen, don't hesitate to challenge him and use this move against him. So, instead of playing bishop c5, black can also play bishop b4, checking your king. You can respond by playing c3 to defend against the check. If black decides to exchange bishops, it actually benefits you because it helps you develop your knight. Typically, your opponent will capture the knight, because if they don't, you might eventually move your knight to d5 and attack their bishop. So, they take the knight, because it doesn't have any other useful moves to make. After the exchange of bishops, black might not want to bring their knight out immediately because white can then play e5, forcing the knight to retreat. So, black often plays d6 first, then, white can develop the bishop to d3, making similar moves. Black then typically brings their knight out to f6, and white can cancel, short for castle kingside. As we've seen before, if black carelessly castles kingside, white can play e5, leading to the bishop sacrifice on h7. This is a common tactic that works in many variations of this opening. However, instead of castling, black often plays bishop g4, which is a move we will explore next. By playing bishop g4, black aims to pin your knight, hoping to hinder your attack and delay your advance. However, their king is still in the center, and you still have plans to push e5, opening up lines to attack the king. While this sequence isn't entirely predetermined, I want to highlight something exceptionally beautiful here. After attacking the knight, black has a couple of options. They can either move the knight or try to take advantage of the pin by capturing your knight. In both cases, white has a strong response. Let's say black moves the knight. In this case, white can play bishop c4, attacking the knight twice. The interesting part is that, if the knight moves to any square, like here or elsewhere, white can sacrifice the bishop on f7. This is another common tactic in this position. It lures the king out. And then white can continue with knight g5, which is not just a check from the knight but also a discovered check from the rook. Now, let's consider white's next move after the king moves. I'll give you 5 chances to guess the right move. Take a moment to think about it. This move is really impressive, so keep in mind that it's a top-level move. Naturally, many players would think about capturing the bishop with queen takes g4. This move seems strong because it grabs a piece, leaves the enemy king exposed, and puts white in a winning position. However, it doesn't lead to an immediate victory because the game continues from there. There's a move that instantly wins the game, and I'm building up the excitement for it. I want you to understand its impact because while queen g4 may seem like the obvious move, the actual best move in this situation is quite hard to spot. It's not about making attacking moves like queen g4 or queen b3. Are you ready for it? The surprising move is rook f8, which catches everyone off guard and makes you wonder what's happening. It might seem strange because your queen is being attacked, but instead of capturing the attacking piece, you sacrifice your rook without taking anything in return. Now, if the opponent's queen captures your rook, you still don't checkmate immediately, even though black has many pieces that can block the checkmate, like the knight, bishop, or queen, but white can capture those blocking pieces one by one. Even though it might delay the checkmate a bit, eventually, black will run out of defenders, and despite seemingly having many pieces protecting the king, black is actually defenseless. However, finding the winning move can be tricky for white, and it's a subtle move. If your opponent takes the rook with his king, play queen f1, so, by playing queen f1, white vacates a square for the queen and repositions it to a better spot on an open file. Then, after the black king moves to either g8 or e7, it doesn't matter, white delivers checkmate with queen f7. If black tries to be tricky and plays knight takes e5 to take advantage of the pin, white can respond with a rare tactical move called a counterpin. This involves getting out of the initial pin while simultaneously putting the black knight under another pin. It's like countering their attempt to pin your knight by pinning their knight in return. Now, black is in a tough spot because white can capture the knight using either the queen for a check, or the knight directly. The best black can do is to capture a piece in return. However, after knight takes e5, white attacks the queen and the bishop, setting up a checkmate threat. Even if black tries to defend, white can still capture pieces and win. If black takes the knight, they lose the queen. If black captures the queen, they can still capture and secure a win like this, or you try sneaky looking move knight f6 check first. Then, follow up with rook takes e1, also check, which leads to white having an extra bishop and a winning position. Now, let's discuss another line that black might consider. They might realize that you are planning to recapture the pawn either with the queen or by bringing out the knight, so, black might try to overprotect this pawn completely. To prevent white from recapturing the pawn, black may play c5 themselves. It's important to note that if you use a chess engine like chess.com or Lichess, it will evaluate the position as black being up a pawn and give it a numerical value like -1 because, in chess evaluations, one pawn is considered a unit. However, this evaluation doesn't always reflect the true dynamics of the position. In actual human games, white often has a favorable win rate despite being down a pawn according to my evaluation. And let me share a quote with you. Before you fall asleep every day, say something positive to yourself. And, sometimes moves that are not immediately apparent as advantageous, like f4 in this case, can actually be stronger and more practical in human play compared to what a computer might suggest, such as queen takes d4 to regain the pawn. It's important not to blindly trust the computer if you are a human, especially in dynamic positions where long-term planning and strategic ideas are crucial. While the computer may see the extra pawn, it doesn't account for the complexities of surviving an attack and converting that advantage into a winning endgame. When black plays c5 to overprotect their pawn, it can be challenging for most players to handle. Knight f3 followed by knight f6. In this situation, I suggest moving the bishop to c4 instead of d3, as is often done in this line. Normally, we put the bishop on d3, waiting for a chance to use it in a Greek gift sacrifice later, but with c5 played, the squares around c5 become weaker, making bishop c4 an even better move. Black can't easily defend this diagonal now. It becomes quite challenging for black to play d5 now, and the bishop on c4 is doing a great job. So, what options does black have? If they bring their knight out, white can play e5, creating an uncomfortable situation for black. Therefore, black often starts with d6, attempting to control the center square. It doesn't completely prevent white's plans, but it helps to some extent. Then, white castles kingside. Now, black faces difficulties again because if they focus on developing their pieces, white still has threats like e5 and knight g5 looming over the position. Yes, you're right, sometimes black may try playing bishop g4, a move many beginners are fond of because it appears to threaten white's knight and create discomfort. However, there's a tactical shot that we've seen in a previous variation. Take a moment to think about it. The move is bishop takes f7. In the god level variation we discussed earlier, we used a similar trick. If the king captures, white plays knight to g5, delivering a check to the king. On the next move, white can pick up the bishop, disrupting the opponent's position. The king is left vulnerable, and white can continue the attack. Interestingly, many opponents will notice that the bishop is attacking the queen in this position. Taking the knight and then capturing the queen seems like a good idea for black to gain material advantage. However, in this specific situation, after black captures the knight, white cannot recapture the queen directly. Can you figure out why? It's because of the rook on the board, which can deliver a check to the king. If black tries to take the queen after capturing the knight, they will be in trouble because they have to defend their king instead. This gives white the opportunity to take black's queen with an extra queen and a winning position. Now, let's explore a few other common moves in this position. For instance, if white plays f4, black might respond with knight c6 to protect the pawn. White can continue by attacking the knight again, leading to moves like bishop c5 from black and bishop d3 from white, setting up potential tactics involving sacrifices later on. What if your opponent chooses a different strategy? Instead of making careless moves that lead to tactical opportunities, they might play d6 and then castle, followed by bishop g4. Since your bishop is on d3 and not on c4, the tactics involving bishop takes f7 are not available. So, what do you do in this situation? Now, I understand that some of you may comment that no analysis can predict the unexpected moves that my opponents make. It's true that we can't anticipate every move our opponent will make. Sometimes they might play something unexpected. In such cases, it's beneficial to stick to your attacking plan, which you generally understand well. In this scenario, when your opponent plays bishop g4 to pin your knight, you should respond by playing knight to d2. This move supports your knight because you still want to execute the same attacking idea, and your knight needs to be in position for that. After they play knight f6, you can play h3 to push their bishop away. They will likely to capture here because if they retreat, you can continue pushing their bishop until it's captured. Indeed, having your pawn on the f-file provides strategic flexibility. In most cases, when your opponent captures on f3, you can recapture. Now, they may feel comfortable castling since they have resolved the tension in the center. However, if they don't castle, you can still play e5 to open up the position and target their king along the e-file. So, they opt to castle. Yet again, you can play e5, leading to a similar position where they face the consequences of their earlier decisions. And let me tell you a quote about life. Never undervalue who you are, and never underestimate what you are capable of. And yes, the same Greek gift sacrifice comes into play again. After pushing the knight away, if your opponent moves it elsewhere, you sacrifice the bishop on h7, then you play knight to g5 for a check. It's worth noting that this time the knight is protected, so they can't capture it. If the king moves to h6, it's clearly a bad move because of the discovered check with knight takes f7. Yes, going forward is not a viable option for black after the Greek gift sacrifice sequence. If they try retreating the king, you can often bring your queen out to d3 or g4, continuing the attack on the exposed king and setting up a winning position. When the king moves back, playing queen h5 puts black in a difficult position because they can't effectively defend both squares simultaneously. While black can try an intermediate check, it typically doesn't alter the outcome significantly. When you leave, it doesn't change the important thing. They can't prevent you from being checkmated. Now, let's try a different move. Before, we played bishop g4 and then knight d2 to protect our knight. What if they play knight f6 now? They haven't castled yet, so it's too soon for moves like e5 or bishop takes h7, right? We want to wait for them to castle ideally. Also, we want to encourage them to castle. You can make different moves like h3 or a3 and wait for them to castle. Then, you can play e5 and bishop takes h7, but if you want to make black move in the wrong direction, you can play queen e1 first. By playing queen e1, it accomplishes a few things. First, it positions the queen on the e-file, which can make black uncomfortable if you play e5 next. Secondly, from this square, you can move the queen to the king's side, like h4 or g3, to support your attack there. It's interesting to note that even though black is ahead by a pawn in some lines, they might want that pawn to be gone because it's blocking their bishop, so, despite having an extra pawn, that pawn doesn't contribute much for black. If your opponent castles in this situation, seeing that you might be preparing for e5 and an attack, and then you play e5 anyway, things unfold similarly. After the trade, you attack their knight. You can also bring out your bishop to strengthen the attack further if needed. Usually, they will move their knight away, setting themselves up for the Greek gift sacrifice with knight g5. In this scenario, if our queen goes to h4 instead of h5, the outcome remains the same. Queen h4 leads to queen h7 and a successful attack. If they move their rook to defend, you can still check and then play rook takes f7. These were our today's chess traps and tricks which you can apply in your games, and don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel. Bye bye, see ya.